Hey, I've been looking for you.
You lied to me! Shame, shame!
Guys, right? I have not... To give you some context, right? I just came back from the gym. I am full of lactic acid right now. I'm at my most toxic. I'm at my most toxic era. I'm a toxic era David, right? Toxic storyteller, right? So I come back from the gym. I'm getting messages. I'm getting DMs. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Like, new Boondock season? No. Apollo Justice Trilogy. You lie. You lie. You lie overtly. You lie to my face. Why? Cool. I told myself I'm not making a single Ace Attorney. Keep it right. Like, I have Ace Attorney scripts. Literally, I have a script called the Ace Attorney Case Conundrum. Literally, right on my hard drive. Some of it has been uploaded to my second channel, right? And I haven't put them out because I said I'm not gonna make a single Ace Attorney video until Ace Attorney 7 is announced. We literally saw the timeline, everything. I think it's so important I communicate to people like how closely tied I am to Ace Attorney before I communicate how I feel to this news and how I've been feeling to Ace Attorney recently. Cool. So what is my history with Ace Attorney? That's the immediate question. I'm gonna bring this closer. That's the immediate question that some of you might want the answer to. Who are you? Why do you matter? Effectively. Cool. So I have a strong history of Ace Attorney. I made Phoenix Wrongs. I made music videos. I made basically glorified memes and shitposts. I made fancase showcase videos. I made discussion videos. I made a podcast. I made a second channel called the Mason System, dedicated to a secondary form of live call-in Ace Attorney podcast, right? I was in the Discord. I was in the Reddit. I was so into it. I was on the court record forums. I was on the case making. I know AAO. I know AO. I know the case making, like, I've made cases. I'm on the case making websites and little programs and apps. If it's an Ace Attorney related thing, I've seen it or I've engaged in it. So I want to make it so clear. This isn't just some guy that got into Ace Attorney in 2014 and was like, yeah, like, it's kind of cool, haha, objection. Or got into the series from the trilogy, remakes or whatever. No offense to those people. Their opinions are still valid. You know, catch up how you will. You're talking to someone that like grew up on this series at the age of like 8 years old, 9 years old. And like, to get a bit personal, right? Like, really related to some of what the characters were going through, loved it, was really engaged, etc., etc. So I want to stress before I communicate anything that like, I am not just sitting here like coming from this very casual perspective, right? I am a very diehard Ace Attorney fan. I love these characters. I love this world. I love the tone. I'm working on a game right now, visual novel game, right? Well, very visual novel heavy. That comes from my love of Ace Attorney to some capacity, right? Before this channel was Boondocks, before it was Black Identity and this, that, it was Ace Attorney. It was just Ace Attorney. And it is so imperative I communicate that. It's so imperative that I make clear just how much I enjoy this series and how much I love it. Before I go into why A, I'm not a big fan of the Apollo Justice Trilogy, and 2, why I've been having some issues and reservations with this series more recently. I apologize for the audio as it is right now because I left my mic, I recently moved, so I left my mic back at home, so I'm actually got someone looking after it now. I need to go pick it up. But this was so urgent, it was so important that I felt the need to record it despite the bad audio. So, first and foremost, we're going to start with the Apollo Justice Trilogy. Now, what is the problem with the Apollo Justice Trilogy? Because you can see the title of the video, why this storyteller? What do you even have to add to this? You know, the beautiful thing about Ace Attorney is, especially being a fan and being someone that's been a bit more out of the community more recently, is that I love Ace Attorney because every time you go back, it's the exact same thing. I love it because it brings back all those fuzzy feelings, those games that made you feel those games that made you feel But ultimately, all of it, there's such a fond and sincere love for it. But there's also a part of me that really is frustrated with Ace Attorney because so much of it is the same thing. Apollo Justice, the game, was for the longest time, like, I was the stan. The AJ in the Storyteller AJ that you see in my channel, like, at the Storyteller AJ, like my email, my channel icon, like my channel at, like, handle, right? That AJ stands for Apollo Justice because I loved the game, I loved the character, I loved the setup, and I need to gush about Apollo Justice for a little bit, just a little bit, to, again, give some more perspective here. Apollo was so cool. I've always been so into the kind of protege energy. He serves as a role as the next protagonist really well. He both edges in new players who are new to the series, who are unfamiliar with Phoenix Wright, while also working as almost somewhat of a stand-in with people who are familiar with Phoenix Wright. With him being like a bit more familiar with Phoenix's cases. He gets very frustrated when Phoenix forges evidence, punches him in the face. Some interesting characterization there. And him slowly being jaded and almost a bit numbed to kind of meeting his quote-unquote hero to some capacity. Him working with Phoenix's adopted daughter was really cool. I like Trucy is so cool. Like the idea that in case 1, Trucy is the one that forges the evidence is so cool to me. There's so many interesting elements to it. I like how the perceive, while the mechanic wasn't handled great, thematically it's supposed to be a bit like a gambling game. Super cool, love it, right? I think case 2, I think case 2 is interesting, right? I like the different twists and turns it takes you on. Obviously I'm a big fan of Emma. I think Apollo Justice saved the character of Emma. At least from a characterization perspective, really took her out of that Maya role. I love Apollo's dynamic with Clavier and how, like, Clavier Gavin and how he feels to the Gaviners, in the sense that, like, and I love how petty Clavier is. A lot of people say Clavier is really nice, when in reality he's just really condescending, and I really like that. And if you see in case 3, he's not a nice guy. Do you know what I mean? When he gets really pissy, you know? He's like one of those, he's very pompous, like he's very caught up in himself. And I like Apollo's jealousy of that. I like that they can be friendly and have moments, but it's also kind of like, Apollo's like the nerd and Clavier's the cool kid. And I love that energy. I think that's great. It's a very cool subversion of like the kind of Miles Edgeworth stuff. I like that Kristoff was the killer. I like the setup there. Love what they did with Phoenix. I think Phoenix is at his absolute best in Apollo Justice. So cool. So much cool stuff. The Mason system, love it. Case 4, one of my favorites in the series. Case 1, still the strongest case 1 in the whole series. Case 3, love the commentary on the legal system, even though they get a bit caught up in it sometimes, right? Love the twist at the end, but just music is great. Overall, love Apollo Justice, right? So here comes in Dual Destinies to effectively, you know, do what Dual Destinies does. Dual Destinies is a very fun game. I think the game is very fun. I feel like it does a lot to dampen some of what is set up in Apollo Justice, which is like a very like well-documented conversation at this point. I don't feel like it bears repeating, but giving Phoenix back his badge, introducing a new lawyer, which kind of makes Trucy redundant from an assistant position. Emma is nowhere to be seen. Clavier is relegated to like this small moment, like mock trial moment in Turnabout Academy that becomes a lot more about Athena and Simon Blackwell and her friends, as opposed to, you know, some of the ideas thematically that I felt tied very well into Apollo's game. You know, I have a big case study review on Turnabout Academy that you can watch that goes a bit more into this. So I want to communicate once again. And then like they have the whole Dark Age of the Law stuff and contradicting ideas on where that goes. And Apollo's character direction shifts from, okay, his dad died in an accident sometime. He is the half-brother of Trucy, long lost, whatever. And he just happened to stumble into this kind of protege role for Phoenix Wright. Apollo isn't perfect, the game isn't perfect, but then his backstory shifts a bit. And it's like, well, Phoenix doing this thing now. And it's like, hey, you know, I actually had a best friend. And he's super important. He's my friend. I have a friend. You know, in Turnabout Academy, love to hype up his friend. And that became the crux of his backstory. And they did a completely different thing with him. New turn. Still legal system related, but was thematically and contextually different from what was set up in Apollo Justice. The jury system, you know, kind of doubling down on some of the critiques that were in the series, even prior to Apollo Justice, doesn't really get expanded upon. Now it's about what was once a problem with the legal system has now become a problem with the people's perception of the legal system, which felt like a very dramatic shift. That wasn't where his character was really going, but cool. All right, still like Apollo as a straight man. Spirit of Justice, supposedly Apollo Justice too. In the eyes of who? No idea. Trucy gets her closure, quote unquote. It feels so rushed and out of place, and it feels like she didn't get, like, you know how like Maya had this kind of several games to set up what she had, you know, like the whole family beef, the whole familial beef that she had going on with Morgan Faye and the right to kind of the Korean channeling technique, all of this stuff, which is these moving elements in the background that culminates in Bridge to the Turnabout. These aren't exceptional cases, but these were lovely. Like, this was rich character stuff, in my opinion. Loved it. Cool. And Tracy doesn't really get that. So when he starts crying in The Magical Turnabout, a part of me wants to feel something, because I love Apollo Justice and I love it. I love like these characters, but I'm sitting here like, this isn't earned. And that's exactly how I feel to a lot of the stuff in Spirit of Justice. I'm like, this isn't earned. This isn't Apollo's moment. He gets a new backstory. And this is a big thing I noticed with Apollo. Apollo became less of a character and more of a straight man whose backstory is made to fit the game he's in. And so we go, yeah, they really expanded on Apollo's character. We really got a lot more expansion on his character and his motivation and what have you. When the core of Apollo doesn't really change. It's almost like he goes through a succession of motivational speeches and phrases. And it's like, cords of steel, here I come. I'm fine. A dragon never yields. And it's always kind of, they're kind of saying the same thing. Don't give up, you know, whatever, right? And I'm sitting here getting all of these backstories, and I'm like, well, what does this do for Apollo's character? You know, how does this, you know, we can have a lot of conversations about what Phoenix's character arc was and whatever, right? But Apollo doesn't really get that, right? He doesn't get his focus. I don't think he gets the time to truly develop. Bro has like one case, to be honest, 1.5 cases in Dual Destinies, and then he gets let's give him 2. Then he gets 2 cases in Spirit of Justice. So after his game, he gets what, like, for maths, 3.5 cases out of 12 cases across 2 games, right? And he doesn't even get top billing, you know? Why is this important? Because this is being marketed as Apollo Justice's trilogy. And the question I sometimes find myself asking is, well, who is that for? Because it's certainly not for me. And like, as someone that was like the big defender of Apollo Justice, like, he is so cool, you know? Like, he is the best. He is so, like, I like him and I want to see more of him. And everyone's like, he doesn't have a character, right? And then they just kept shoving backstory upon backstory on him. I can't help, and like, obviously these marketing ploys to bring back Phoenix and make him the focus and bring back these other characters, right? It's like, this isn't Apollo's trilogy, you know, and it's a bit disheartening. Like, it's kind of, like, I saw a tweet by Bolt, like, just as I saw the news, right? And he said, it's kind for them to call this the Apollo Justice trilogy. It's false, but it's kind, and I do agree with it completely. Where it's like, a part of me is like, hey, Apollo finally gets to have top billing. But we all know that that's not really what he got. And so even me saying Apollo Justice is my favorite character in Ace Attorney comes with so many caveats. Because ironically, with time, in my opinion, he became almost everything wrong with Ace Attorney. And what was once the shining beacon of hope, of change and something new and quote-unquote revolutionary about Ace Attorney slowly morphed into kind of everything I began to kind of grow frustrated with Ace Attorney. Like, all these backstories and like you know, the same motivational phrases and the same kind of types of backstories, right? And the same ways that they frame these stories and these conflicts. And I'm sitting here like, it's so comforting to go back, again, as someone that distances themselves a bit more now. But man, like, as a fan, it can get a bit exhausting seeing the same thing happen over and over again. And to see a character that like was like, oh yeah, you're gonna be the fresh new thing, and just not be that, is kind of disheartening, you know? So that's the first part. That's the first part of this, right? The second part of this is obviously me kind of wanting to use this as a caveat to talk a bit more about some of the issues I'm just having with Ace Attorney generally, and what this kind of, what I want. I've talked a bit about like what I want from Ace Attorney 7, and it's complicated. You know, I had a video scripted about this, and I do want to talk a bit more about this. A lot of people say, and I'm not alone in this conversation. Like, a lot of people, there will be people that don't agree with what I'm saying a bit before, but there are Ace Attorney fans that completely feel me. They're like, yeah, Apollo got a bit screwed, you know, and like, Phoenix shouldn't have come back, and it would have been nice for Athena to be made, maybe, but like, to get her own chance to shine, and maybe we cluttered the cast a bit more, right? But then many of these same people would go on to say that maybe the Great Ace Attorney has resolved this. And in some ways it has. But in many ways, I think the Great Ace Attorney speaks to like the fact that this isn't in totality what is holding Ace Attorney back. And I kind of want to explain a bit more what I mean by this. The responsibility of Apollo Justice, and this is why Apollo is so important, just in a conversation about Ace Attorney and its direction, where it's been going. It's the, like, and his trilogy, right? Because I do want to have just a big, open conversation about his trilogy. You know, Apollo Justice, in my opinion, it's his trilogy, if we're referring to it like that, failed to do one thing and one thing very clearly. And that was to push Ace Attorney forward. And that is not solely from a character perspective. Some of that is also from a gameplay perspective. Now, some of you might look and say, hey, we've got a bunch of gameplay gimmicks now. We've got the mood matrix, and we've got all this forensic investigation, and we have the divination seance, and we have, I mean, Maya can channel spirits, right? And the Magatama, and what was the new one, right? They're always adding a new one, right? The mood matrix, Magatama, the perceive. Gosh, they're always having a gimmick. And I get, you know, that's the marketing ploy, right? Divination seance, you can see the death. It's cool, whatever, right? But how much of that is actually expanding upon Ace Attorney's case solving, its level design? The level design of Ace Attorney is the case design, effectively, right? Now, I'm not someone that's super obsessed with case design. It doesn't matter as much to me, to be transparent, but it matters. And the reason I want to communicate that it matters is because when you played 1-1, the first turnabout, or your first Ace Attorney case, you didn't know anything about these characters. You didn't know Phoenix. You didn't know Athena. You didn't know Apollo. Right? You didn't know any of these guys. Maybe you thought they were endearing. I'll tell you for free, I didn't back then. Right? I didn't. Maybe there was one funny line, but to be blunt, it wasn't that funny. But you know what caught me about Ace Attorney? It was that first objection. It was going, hang on a minute. The time is wrong. The time is wrong. The time is wrong here. Why is it wrong? That's the contradiction, right? And you press it, and the music stops, and there's this pause, there's this moment, and it pans to Phoenix, and he questions it, and then the music hits, and it is perfect. It is it is such a perfect moment, right? Using the limitations of the GBA, they made something so incredible. This synergy between music and sound effects and player engagement in a visual novel that required you to think about these contradictions and the way they engage with the way the case progresses and what have you. It was so fascinating. It was so cool. Why is this relevant? It feels as though in this focus on character drama, these backstories, and again, Apollo is relevant to this. It's very, very relevant. there has been a real regression in how these cases have been designed. A good example would be the first case of DGS. I love the characters in DGS. I love them. Ryu, awesome. Susato, so fun, right? The Susato flip, that's great. Sogi wasn't like a bit crazy fan or whatever, right? You have Sherlock, just goofing around, right? Guys, what are your thoughts of him? I feel it was fun, whatever, right? You have this colorful cast of characters, so fun, so cool, right? But you know what happens in the first case? You know what actually happens? A whole lot of nothing. Nothing happens in that first case. In that first case of DGS, you know what happens? They spend a good 40 minutes talking about nothing. And you get, oh yeah, look, all the nice animations, right? And it's all this big build-up. But nothing is happening. Nothing much is being progressed within the case. There has been a real regression in case design, in the gameplay of Ace Attorney. Now, the question now becomes, well, how do you kind of innovate on the gameplay of Ace Attorney? And the formula is there. It's in mid. Investigations, right? Now, the investigation series is interesting because it both is and isn't kind of how I would like to see Ace Attorney be expanded in the future. I think, while the investigation series still has a pacing issue, what the investigation series does incredibly well is it's so much more focused on solving the case. There's not a moment where you're not doing something around the case. You know, a lot of people critique the investigation segments, and while you can make the argument that they do a lot of like to build you up in these big cases, something that holds them back ultimately is that like there's such a strong limit to what you can do in them, right? Because ultimately the moment where you can make stuff happen is the cases, right? Or in the trial. And the investigation series ultimately fixes this. There's this big issue with the pacing in Ace Attorney cases. Turnabout Revolution, Rise from the Ashes. Man, like, we have this there's this kind of idea, and this is general idea with games, where like, the longer it is, the better it is, and sometimes that's just not true, you know? Like, Turnabout Samurai, like, is a 3-day case that doesn't need to be 3 days. Bro, you proved that Will Powers can do that by day 2. Why is day 3 happening? You know? They're like, and this is kind of a big thing, right? Like, oh, even like a great example of this, and I'm kind of critiquing the whole series here, because it feels like Ace Attorney is very caught up in its past here. Like, you know, you have Ace Attorney 1, right? Or Ace Attorney 2 and Ace Attorney 3. There are these moments where you have evidence and you can't solve anything. And then a character comes bursting in and says, here, I have it. Here's the evidence, take it. And like, it's Gumshoe or Francisca or Mia, and they love this trope. But what the problem with this trope is that it kind of really robs you of those moments where you're like, that's it, you know? It heightens the drama of the moment, but it divorces you from it from a gameplay perspective. I feel like Ace Attorney has been divorcing the players more and more from its, in my opinion, one and only gameplay draw. Now, some of you might look at this and say, oh, that doesn't matter. I'm here for the characters. The characters are what matter. And I used to believe this, like wholeheartedly. But even I think some of that isn't true. And the reason I communicate this, I'm going to use Apollo Justice as an example. Something I've noticed in the Ace Attorney community, generally speaking, is that when there is a case that people don't like, when there's a case that people don't like, right, or they don't like the characters in it, they tend to be a lot more perceptive of the issues within the case. Turnabout Serenade doesn't have a lot of endearing characters, right? You have Machi, you have Thalassa, you have Darian, right? And like what, the old beard guy that dies? Ooh, right? Case 2, Waki Katoki. Bro, I don't even know the rest, and I love Apollo Justice, right? And you have the girl like Italia Lalia or something else, you know what I mean? Like, I love Apollo, but let's be real, man. You know, right? And people aren't endeared by these characters, right? So what do they have to latch onto but the case? And then they become a lot more perceptive. Hang on a minute. Doesn't make sense for a kid to shoot that gun. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? But these issues exist throughout the trilogy. Throughout the whole series. And this isn't a knock. I'm not knocking anyone for this. But we tend to be a lot more forgiving of cases. With these issues, these case design issues. When we're more endeared by the characters. Or more engaged in the drama. Right? And there's nothing wrong with this. To an extent. And I'm susceptible to it too. Turnabout Succession has a myriad of problems. But you know, the Mason system is cool. I don't know what to tell you. Phoenix recording everything from his hat. You know, his moments with Trucy. Oh, that's so great. It was so cool. But am I going to sit here and say Turnabout Succession is flawless? No. But I'm easier to be endeared by it. I'm less susceptible to its flaws. Because I love the character stuff going on there. Now, when you don't love what's going on, you're more inclined to look at it and go, I'm not a big fan of it. You know what I mean? Farewell My Turnabout. It's a whole scene where like Will Powers just sees Shady the Killer walk out of the room after he kills someone. What kind of assassin are you? Every time Shady the Killer's on the phone with Phoenix, some hard to catch assassin, his cat's always getting in the way. What kind of assassin are you? Do you know what I mean? What's it called? The Bridge to the Turnabout has that moment where it's like whoosh and the body is flown over the kind of what's it called? The fire bridge. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense how that happened. Right? You have what's it called? Do you have the moment in Turnabout Memories where Mia has to go, he was struck by lightning. Whoosh. Why would you do this? You know? And like, you realize like Ace Attorney cases, they struggle to condition you to a set of rules. Right? And when the rules don't matter, and they're very like flimsy and they don't mean anything, what reason does the player have to engage in the case? You know what I mean? And this is different from the people that are just kind of watching Ace Attorney, like from a video perspective. I mean, actually like engaging. Right? What incentive do you give for people to care about these cases or care about the case design if there are no clear rules in how these cases are constructed? What does the mood matrix even mean? Like, we talk about the Dark Ages of Law, prosecutors are manipulating everything. Okay, so why can Athena, right, play this psychology game that only she can interpret and just happens to only fit her, right? Love to perceive, but it's another, like, variable in this issue. Apollo looks at you and says, you're doing a twitchy right now, right? And he says, that means you're lying. Do you know what I mean? But you're nervous about this. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything, right? And what we end up having is like these gameplay additions that don't enhance the case solving element. They just kind of pad things out. You know what I mean? Or like in some ways, make it so that the way you actually go about solving the case doesn't make much sense. And this is where we talk about pacing and structure and all these things. And Apollo's trilogy, for better or worse, really suffers from this. And I don't think DTS fixes it. I don't think Apollo's trilogy gets any better with it. It gets a lot worse. Turnabout Revolution sucks, right? And the Ace Attorney trilogy isn't that great with it. You know what I mean? But the Ace Attorney trilogy can be forgiven on the premise that like it was a GBA game and it was early on and they were still getting their bearings, right? But it feels like throughout the years, Ace Attorney just keeps doubling down and it keeps using the trilogy as this magical framework. How many final cases are just farewell my turnabout again? Maya's kidnapped, Edgeworth comes back, someone's kidnapped, Edgeworth comes back, the law, everything comes crumbling down. Do you know what I mean? And it's sitting here like, again, not only is Ace Attorney doing the same things over and over again, but all of this hampers with the case design a lot, where things get padded out, the pacing is weird. Instead, like imagine in the first turnabout, right? Instead of you solving the end part with the passport, Mia came in and said, hey, here you go. Here's the passport. Present this. This is it. You know? Ace Attorney has a lot of problems with its pacing and cases and what have you, right? And I'm saying all of this, and I prefix this video by saying I'm a big fan of Ace Attorney. I love this series. But it could afford to work on some things. And looking at the Apollo trilogy, right, I look at it and I see, like, I just basically see kind of the regression of a series that I really loved. And I still do love, don't get it twisted. Like, Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice are my, like, least favorite Ace Attorney games. Like, at least from a narrative level. But I still enjoy them. I still enjoy some of the characters. Like, it is Ace Attorney. It's still Ace Attorney, for better or worse. But, you know, as a fan, like, it's different from me speaking casually as I love Ace Attorney and speaking more as a fan. It's been a bit disappointing to see Ace Attorney fall under the same trappings it has for decades now. For like 2 decades now. It's been a bit disappointing to see the potential of some character. Like, what is Apollo's arc? What is Apollo's arc? His arc is like, what's it called? I'm gonna change the jury system, right? It's something to do with the jury system. The legal system is corrupt. I'm gonna do something to help it, right? The problem is the people now in Dual Destinies. And it's like, wow, the people and their perception of us, it's bad. And we need to fix it by just being honest, good people. Yeah, let's party. Contradicts the first game, but whatever. And then in Spirit of Justice, it's like, yeah, really, I just wanted to stop the corrupt Kurayin legal system. And it's like, there's no coherency. There's no organic storytelling. There's no organic arc. They're just these self-contained stories where he is thrust into the final case out of nowhere. And it happens both times. Just, man. It sounds like I've complained a lot about Ace Attorney, but I want to make it clear, and obviously this is a ramble, I'm just kind of going off my heart, what's in my heart right now. It sounds like I've complained a lot about Ace Attorney, but I must stress, I have so much love for this series. It means so much to me. It has gotten me through some dark times, but I look at this trilogy, man. I look at DGS to some capacity. I look at Ace Attorney. Look at the investigation series. The investigation series is not perfect. Got some pacing issues. I think 2 really doubles down on a lot of those Ace Attorney issues, right? And it's like, okay, and this is like a very good example. I want to give a really good example for this to kind of really communicate my point here, right? Has anybody, and I've done it, I've tried to do it, right? I'll say it, either played an Ace Attorney fan case or tried to make one, right? And something you notice, right? And you can tell this, right? The people inspired by the series, right? People that are very like into the series get very fanficky with it. They're like, yeah, the continuation of Apollo Justice, Athena's new story where she gets to be the focus, right? And so much of it is like this almost self-indulgent, masturbatory, like, yeah, hi Emma, how you doing? Yeah, I'm doing the forensic thing, blah, 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 blah. And it's like all of this, right? And none of it is about the case, right? And they're doing all this flavor. But here's the thing, right? And this is the difference from the main series and fan case. If it's a fan case, you're less inclined to care. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying this as someone that's played a bunch of them, right? Like, it's harder to engage people with your non-canon, like, fanficky, like, fan case thing, right? So you have to make a good case, effectively, right? And get to the point quicker, right? And then when you can see the ones that like really struggle to like make a good case and make it flow well, to make these contradictions flow into the next point very well. They're gonna cover their bases, and it's very hard. It's super hard, right? And a big issue of it is also because Ace Attorney hasn't mastered the framework for it, you know? Now, am I sitting here saying the cases matter more or the characters matter more? No. I think both of these things work in tandem, but Ace Attorney has fumbled, or at least this Apollo Justice trilogy, to me has fumbled so astronomically from a character and case design perspective that I kind of wanted to use this platform to kind of just put that to the forefront and get that out there. Because, it's not, I don't know, and I'm gonna speak very sincerely from the heart here, no like No, like, oh yeah, like we gotta frame this some type of way, and gonna get really mad now. I'm less lactic acid now. I'm more like being sincere. It really is a shame to me, right? That like I couldn't like Dual Destinies more, or like I couldn't like Spirit of Justice. But you know how much I love that first game, man. How much I love it. It's a shame to me that like, despite Apollo Justice being the DS next gen thing, it's basically just the Ace Attorney trilogy again, with arguably less investigation mechanics, right? Like, it doesn't evolve the formula at all, you know? And that's a fault of Apollo Justice, and that this trilogy, quote unquote, just doubles down. We're often told that's what Ace Attorney is, that's what it does, but it doesn't have to do that. Investigations, I've said this many times, Investigations is not even in my top 3. None of those games are even in my top 3. Maybe not even top 4, right? But I'll tell you this, like, from a gameplay perspective, it baffles me why making improvements to how these cases flow and are structured is relegated to a spin-off. Why? Why not take some of that and add that? Why not add the logic mechanic to like the investigations? Why not like let you solve things and get into these debates during the investigations, even if you still have the trials, right? Why not? Why not double down on that element? You know what I mean? It would sure as hell make it feel like you're doing, like, okay, a good example is Danganronpa. Danganronpa, like, has you doing so many mini games for nothing, right? Like, to solve, like, it'll be like, oh, what's the name of the culprit again? And you're doing like 10 different mini games, like sword fights and all this stuff. I'm sitting here like, what does this do? Like, what does this add? You know? I love Ace Attorney, man. I've got so much respect for Shu Takumi, so much respect for the team. But I do wish that, like, yeah, I wish they were able to do more, man. And I wish this series could be more. I made a video called Ace Attorney: The Next Generation, and it was kind of going over some of the ideas I had for what Ace Attorney could do in its next generation. There's so much this series could do, right? Like, you could double down so hard. You could have like side quests. You could flesh out the world a lot more, right? If you just changed the way these investigations flowed, or maybe even got rid of them entirely, depending on your perspective, right? You could make these cases tighter, so like I don't feel like I'm wasting my time. Here's the problem: when you're listening to dialogue from characters you don't like, you feel like you're wasting your time. It's a slog, right? And everybody has the one case that they don't like it from. You know what I mean? Like, how about relegating the fluff to like these side things, right? Or like, you know, having unlockable outfits or unlockable side cases. Or if you want to have multiple characters, have that be relegated to different mini campaigns. You know, there's so much that you could do. But again, it feels like it's so stuck. The Apollo Justice Trilogy feels stuck. Stuck with what it thinks works. The trilogy is not the perfect basis for what Ace Attorney can and should be. And if there's anything that I would like from this comment section, it wouldn't be people going, man, I just don't think you like Ace Attorney anymore. No, because I still love it, man. Ace Attorney is so cool. I still listen to the music. I'm programming while I'm working, whatever, right? But if there's one thing I would love for this comment section to be, it would be like people's ideas of what they think Ace Attorney could evolve to be, you know? Whether that's a gameplay mechanic, whether that's from a case design perspective, right? I would love to see more people's ideas about this, because I've seen a lot of the conversation around, oh man, and now everything's solved because we've got a new cast now, or they're doing more commentary on the legal system and this, that, and it's like, look, that's fine and dandy, and I can make videos about that at a later point, but this series is still the same, you know, and it hasn't improved since its GBA days, to be blunt. Visually, yeah, looks nice, you know, love the 3D models, cool. But from a gameplay perspective, from a pacing perspective, from a flow perspective, no, it hasn't. In some ways, it's regressing. because it's doubling down on ideas that, in my opinion, in the trilogy, some of them didn't work, right? Farewell My Turnabout isn't flawless. Bridge to the Turnabout isn't flawless. You know what I mean? None of those trilogy cases are flawless. And until a true innovation is made in terms of like how these cases are tackled from a pacing perspective, from a case design perspective, I highly doubt that like the game that comes after this trilogy, right? Because we know it's coming, right? Like we've seen the timeline, right? Will do anything. And that's not what I want. And it'd be a shame if like after all of this, after we sat there and we endured Apollo's torture flick, you know, for 3 straight games, right? Disappointment, whatever, right? That, you know, Ace Attorney 7 comes out and we see another pro tag get screwed. Like, or we see these cases being built the exact same ways, right? Where it feels like they haven't been well thought out, or the way they're paced, or like the character arcs don't feel organic anymore. And I'm not doubling down on one or the other. The cases are not the priority, the characters are not the priority. They are both working in tandem to create something that to me is Ace Attorney and makes it so enjoyable, you know? And I just think it's a shame. You know, anyway, this is the video. I know it hasn't been that upbeat, but I have to keep saying I love Ace Attorney, man. I don't know what to tell you. And it brings out such an enthusiasm out of me, man. Like you don't talk about this series like this if you don't care. You know what I mean? Like, you don't talk about like, bro, Reunion My Turnabout, such a flawed case. I love that case. You crazy? Bro, when I saw that and Maya was all covered in the blood, I was like, bro, Maya did it. What am I gonna do, bro? Now, so many issues. Bloodstain on the incinerator made no sense. Why do you only interrogate Eenie, Miney, and Paul on the second day? Makatama creates some pacing issues in GFA and Trials and Tribulations, right? But like, man, that case is so cool, man. And I love the backstory. Like, Ace Attorney's cool, but it could be so much cooler. And if there's something I try my best to encourage Ace Attorney fans to do, it's not just be content. Because you know they do listen to you. You know the reason Apollo got that push, and I still remember this interview, is because Takeshi Yamazaki and Motohide Ashiro, I still remember them niggas' names. I think I don't know. I know them. I think I don't remember them. I know them, man. I had an interview, and they were like, you know what the feedback we got from Dual Destinies was? They said they wanted to be able to see the background, like engage with the backgrounds again, examine. The game was a bit too easy, and what's it called? People wanted to see more from Apollo. And you know what they did? They brought it all back. All the dialogue options for the background, they brought it back. They made the cases a bit harder. They added the hint system if you needed it, but they made the cases a bit harder, right? And I will be blunt, Spirit of Justice is a harder game, technically speaking, depending on who you ask and how it's thinking, than Dual Destinies. And lastly, they gave Apollo a major role in this game. And obviously brought back Maya because you guys were clamoring for it. You know what I mean? They listen. They really do listen. And you know what a big factor for that was? It was because he went to a convention in the US. It matters. So this conversation, and look, I work in PR, right? Social media, what have you. Don't think they're not bringing what you guys are saying back to the team. Don't think, look, that Ace Attorney Twitter is funny. We like to make our jokes, right? But you know the truth of the matter is, they are listening. They hear what you man are saying. So control the conversation and be wise. What do you want? Be very clear. I'm not saying just do what I want, man. If it was up to me, we're getting a reboot, and we need some new blood, new writers, and we really got to rethink how we build these cases and have a clearer vision for what these arcs are going to be. Because like DGS has some nice arcs, for the record. Some retreads that I'm not a big fan of. Some decisions I'm not crazy about, but you know, some nice arcs. But like, man, like, yes, that's if it was up to me, I'm gonna be real. But above it all, recognize these people listen to you, right? I hear all this conversation about what character do you want to see come back, or like, can't wait for DGS 3, where or I can't wait for Ace Attorney 7, where Apollo gets to meet Trucy and tell them they're brothers, or like Iris gets out, or to see Gumshoe again, or Francisca, or like Athena and this, that, and this is all very fan servicey stuff. But what from a gameplay perspective do you want to see from Ace Attorney? Now, some of you might say, I don't play Ace Attorney for gameplay, right? Or where do you want to see these arcs go, right? What would be an interesting, unique direction you'd like to see Ace Attorney take with a character, right? You know, what's something that bugs you about the case design of Ace Attorney that you think could be improved? In my opinion, I think these cases are a bit too long and padded out with mechanics and, to be blunt, like contradictions that don't make sense. You know, Turnabout Revolution has a whole day that doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? There's a bunch of these cases that have like redundant first days and redundant investigations, right? You know, I would like to see I would prefer a tighter, shorter Ace Attorney game than a very padded out Ace Attorney game that like I was just kind of slugging through, you know? I got so much passion and love for this series, man. I just want to see it be the best it can be, man. Anyway, that's the video. That's the video. Control the conversation. Control your thoughts. As always, I have so much love for you, Apollo. The guy, love the show, love the series. Even if like that first game, I'm probably gonna cop this on the premise of supporting the boy. Put in the AJ and Storyteller AJ. Dual Destinies I've played like 7 times for research purposes to validate my perspective. So Dual Destinies, I think it's a fun Ace Attorney game when you look at it outside of the context of like, it's so silly and so dumb, but it has so much fun with itself, so I can enjoy it. Spirit of Justice I find like actually like boring. Because it's not even that fun, like, which is a shame, because it's doing narrative stuff I don't like, and I just don't, it's like so melodramatic, and I'm just like, you know. But yeah, okay, that's a bit of a downer, but I'm still gonna call up the game. This is hopefully makes up for the lack of Ace Attorney content for the last forever, you know what I mean? So you have this nice podcasty diatribe to just return to. If you want to get a sense for where I'm feeling with Ace Attorney, I will return when Ace Attorney 7 is announced. Don't ask when the next Ace Attorney video is. Support NIXIE, the game I'm working on. It wouldn't exist without Ace Attorney. Gosh, man. Trilogy? Alright, you man take care, yeah. Stay safe. Peace.